Welcome to In But Not Of, a podcast dedicated to applying a Christian worldview to the study of history and culture. We're so glad that you could join us today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next installment of our look at the counterculture. Today's episode is entitled Woodstock West, More Love, Peace, and Music. The title is a bit misleading, as you'll see, because that's pretty much the opposite of what we get here. So one of the things as we get started here to remember is that between August and December, you have the great Woodstock concert, at least in public memory, take place in August of 1969. And so because it generates so much publicity, there's a movie coming out about the concert. Definitely, one of those pivotal moments. Even in 1969, people were talking about this as something that was really, really significant. So anytime anything like that happens, of course, people want to capitalize on it. They want to recreate it if possible. And Woodstock, I think, is probably one of the biggest examples we have of that constant striving to recreate that in various venues, whether it's on a large scale or a small scale. This idea of recreating what happened at Woodstock. And of course, last time we talked about what the popular memory is and what reality is, two different things in many aspects of the concert. So on the West Coast, where of course we know a lot of the bands got their start, the countercultural bands that really kind of gave an identity to the movement really began out in San Francisco. Bands like the Grateful Dead, Big Brother and the Holding Company, the Airplane. So there's a desire here to recreate something very similar out on the West Coast. Now, there had been other festivals as we've gone over. Woodstock was not unique in that sense, and Altamont's not going to be unique either. There's trouble at various different festivals that we've kind of touched on a little bit, but police and people tearing down fences and just problems in general of maintaining order is really synonymous with these music festivals more than the Woodstock being the example of where some of that did not happen. So the Grateful Dead were interested in the original plan to kind of have this concert on the West Coast, this free concert, which they have been doing for a long time. They would show up on the back of a pickup truck bed, for instance, and begin to play out in San Francisco. And the plan originally was to get the Rolling Stones involved. So as you've noticed, we haven't really mentioned them yet. They were, in many ways, the biggest band, American band, in the mid to late 60s. Obviously, the Beatles had that market cornered, but the Dead were kind of the bad boy image of the Beatles. So the original idea, as discussed by Jerry Garcia and others, was to have the Grateful Dead kind of play a concert, and then the Hells Angels would show up and escort the Rolling Stones to the stage, whatever that was, and they would make a surprise appearance. That was originally what the idea was. The Dead were a mainstay at these festivals, of course, and where the Stones had not really had a chance yet, because to kind of show up and have their name under the lights, so to speak. And there's a reason for that, because the Stones had a great deal of trouble that basically led them to not playing together during these years of between 67 and 69. Things are heating up, obviously, with Monterey and 68. There's obviously something really new going on in music, and the Stones, of course, want to capitalize on this. Now, the problem with them was the infamous drug bust that they were involved with in 67 and 68. Brian Jones, a leading member of the Rolling Stones, mysteriously drowned after he had actually been kicked out of their band due to his drug use and a terrible drug habit. So all of that is kind of happening here between 68 and 69 as the Rolling Stones are trying to get their act together and get on the road and kind of capitalize on, the infatuation that people have with music, with rock and roll. And of course, the counterculture of the 1960s not only is playing itself out in San Francisco, but over at Hyde Park in London as well. And that's where the Stones play a free concert. And this is right on the heels, though, of when Brian Jones is discovered floating in his pool. And so by most accounts, as the Stones show up with their new guitarist, Mick Taylor, to kind of play this concert, many will tell you it was the worst performance of their career. There are a lot of mixed emotions. There's even a scene where they tried to release butterflies into the air. The butterflies were basically, dead by the time they tried to do this. It's just nothing really worked. And beyond that, the Rolling Stones were broke, believe it or not. As kind of 1969, 68, 69 kind of come around here. They had a kind of a band manager who, was managing their money and didn't give them money. But Mick Jagger's debts, for instance, far outweighed his assets. So there's a lot of issues that they're starting to come out from under the drug problems and things like that. But the other issue that happens here is the Rolling Stones were also drawing a reputation for their extremely high ticket prices for obvious reasons. Now, the San Francisco music scene is about freedom and brotherly love and the idea that bands are playing for free, where the Rolling Stones would have this reputation that they actually wanted to counter, that they were very much in tune with the counterculture and wanted to show that to be true. And so one of the things that they wanted to do was to have a free concert to get involved in one like everybody else was doing. Due to the spirit of the times, of course, they want to remain popular. They'd been out of the public eye, at least as far as a concert touring band for quite a while. The other thing that's happening is as the Stones are getting to embark on their tour in 69, they're having a movie done of their American tour. And Jagger desires to have that film released prior to Woodstock. They kind of want to beat Woodstock, the movie's release, out so that they can benefit, from the popularity of that, rather than seeing it as kind of a tag along to the Woodstock movie or an imitation of that. What's interesting is there's a lot of fringe people associated with the Rolling Stones at this time. And so a lot of the planning and the decisions are actually made by people that are loosely connected to the Stones. They're with them a lot, but maybe not as quite in an official capacity. And this is important because later on, when lawsuits are wanting to be levied and people are talking about accepting responsibility, it's also something people can hide behind. And it's also one of the major causes that bands are pointing their fingers at one another in terms of who's responsible for Altamont. So the desire originally was to have the Golden Gate Park as the setting for this massive concert. And this ends up not happening. And partly it was because the Rolling Stones, rather than letting the San Francisco people take care of this, their concert management kind of gets involved and wants to talk directly to the mayor's office in San Francisco, which was a bad move because they want nothing more to do with rock and roll and everything else that's coming into San Francisco. They remember what it was like in the summer of quote unquote love. So they need to find a different venue to hold this concert. So they find a racetrack known as Sears Point. And it really seems to be perfect for a venue like this. It had about 1,000 acres of land, parking for 100,000 cars. It's equipped with toilets, water, electricity. There's room for a large backstage area. Security is already in place, and there's actually police that are nearby that can support this concert were it to happen here. So it looks like everything is a go. And everybody decides that this is the place that it's going to happen. Now, the problem here is Filmways, a company named Filmways, has bought the Sears Point racetrack. And they find out that the Rolling Stones are going to make a movie and make money, even though the proceeds are supposed to go to charity, originally actually to the Vietnamese, a Vietnamese charity. So Filmway says, we want $100,000. We're going to charge you $100,000 fee to have this at our racetrack due to the royalty and music, the film rights. So the Rolling Stones find out about this. They say absolutely no way. They dig their heels in, and there's a battle right now over this $100,000 fee, leading to the idea here that the Stones are not going to have the concert here. Now, this is a problem because tickets, just like at Woodstock, had been sold. And yet again, now they need to find a last-minute replacement for the Sears Raceway. And like Woodstock, they'd already begun to design a stage. Buildings had already been erected and things like that. So we, again, have a last-minute change of venue. Michael Lang, who helped organize the Woodstock concert, as you know, one of the key organizers, famously flies over Altamont, the speedway where we're eventually going to have this concert, looks down, sees the broken glass, the oil stains, and this kind of desolate speedway with its bleak landscape, littered with shrub grass, and 30 to 40 mile an hour winds were not uncommon blowing through this area. He looks down and famously says, "This is perfect." And because Lang pulled off Woodstock, of course, now this is something that people are excited about. Remember, it was a bleak landscape that stopped him, for at least in his excitement at the original Woodstock place. He didn't like that for that reason, but here he says it's perfect. And this location, this desolate kind of location, we've seen this in the past. One of the things that I like is baseball. I'm a big baseball fan. And the Cleveland Indians used to play in Municipal Stadium. And very similar to Altamont, kind of where the Speedway is located, that ballpark was known as the Mistake by the Lake. It held over 70,000 people, but it was windy. It was cold. The flies got to be too much in the summer time. It was just this huge park that they could never fill. And it was just really a disaster. And so Altamont kind of gives you that same idea. Now, what I want to do is play a clip here so you can get a sense of the discussions that were happening back, with the management and things involved here as they were trying to figure out where to have this concert.
And so that we'll have that available, and in a very short order to show cause. The sheriff wants to know who's going to go to the bathroom and where. They've got a nice little bucolic community there that they know practically when every John is flushed and the orderly habits of the bathroom of all of their voters.
Dick Carter's on the line. He's offering us a speedway at Altamont.
Hello, Dick. This is Mel Belli for the Stones. If they were to perform in the speedway, is the speedway open so that they can be seen from the people that can't get in?
Yeah, I'm sure we can work something out because I want the publicity.
You want the publicity?
Right.
Well, you take the publicity, and the Rolling Stones don't want any money. It's for charity, so I'll take the money.
Right?
All right. Well, why don't I do this? Why don't I talk with these people here, and then I'll get back with you, and then if we have to sign anything up, and if you need any insurance, which I'm sure you will want, and all the rest of that stuff, I'll work with you in the morning.
Okay.
All right. I'll call you back later then after I talk with them, Dick. Bye. He's offered the Altamont Speedway.
Not enough room
And there's
for
no
it.
time to move it. You got to tear down a stage and a
We
scaffolding.
got stage scaffolding.
The phones are in. The generators are there. Everything is left to go. It's anticipated that the amount of kids now traveling cross country, you may have anywhere from 5,000 to 20,000 kids starting to arrive sometime through the day tomorrow.
They're all lining up at the airports to come in from as far away as New York.
Yeah. Now?
Yeah. Yes.
You got to be kidding.
You have no idea what goes on here. It's an amazing phenomenon. It's like the lemmings of the sea.
Mike Lang is on the line. Yeah, Mike. John says that he doesn't think you can make it over there at the Altamont Speedway. Do you want to talk directly to Mike?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mike. I got the impression from everybody over where you are that there was no way of moving to that speedway.
We can do it. If we have to, we can do it. We want to, but if we have to, we can.
Just a quick question, though. You were at Woodstock, and you've now been out to Altamont, right, last night. Now, how does it stack up? Do you have the room?
I think we have the room, sure. I think we can hold as many people as want to come.
Can you change locations that fast?
Well, we had a much bigger operation to change at Woodstock. We did it pretty quick. I don't think we'll have much problem. We're just...
Okay. I think you could hear enough there to figure out this last-minute jockeying of moving the concert to Altamont. And there's enough there to certainly raise some eyebrows, right? So the previous, if we're going to look at Altamont Speedway, for instance, the largest number of people that the venue had previously supported was at a demolition derby where 6,500 people had shown up. So this gives you the sense. Now, Altamont is going to have, say 200,000 people there. If memory serves me correctly, in terms of the number that actually ends up showing up. Of course, those numbers are interpreted in different ways, but that's the number that I've run into consistently. And the other thing that you should know about Altamont was because it was so much on the outskirts as far as jurisdiction goes. Only 2 patrol cars manned this area because it was so much on the outskirts of their jurisdiction. Now, as far as security goes, One of the things that's going to characterize Altamont, of course, is the idea that the Hells Angels were hired for the security force for a fee of $500 in beer. I'll talk about that in a minute. But an interesting note was the Stones had played their concert at Hyde Park, and they had a version of the Hells Angels providing help and security in England. The difference was that version of the Hells Angels rode mopeds, they drank tea, they helped lost children find their parents, and even though they had swastikas and Nazi helmets, they wouldn't be confused for a second with their California counterparts. Okay. Now, the other thing that happens here is the Rolling Stones had quite a bit different reputation than a lot of the love, peace, kind of hippie-ish bands that were at Woodstock. They were closer to the Who in terms of they were known as bad boys. Violence would break out at their concerts. Jagger had been punched, had his arm broke, had a chair broke over his head. And in his mind, it seems that he often blamed the police for letting things or, kind of instigating violence. And he did not want them involved with the security here at all. And unlike what at Woodstock, it was decided to use the hog farm. They informally agree to have the Hells Angels help out. Now, remember, originally, the Hells Angels were just supposed to supply an escort. Now they're asked basically to protect the generators that are there and to join the party. So the official kind of accounts of this is the Stones said, sure, we like beer. The statement that was made is in the planning meeting for this. So Sam Cutler, manager for the Stones, says, okay, we'll supply you with $500 worth of beer. Now, how official is this of a hiring of a security force? It seems not as official as you would think. The Hells Angels had been at several music festivals and were kind of used to support what was going on and kind of protect generators. But this idea that they were hired as an official security force is a bit exaggerated, I think. But that's basically how that came about. Now, the Hells Angels were a motorcycle gang, and the way motorcycle gangs kind of evolved in this country, mostly they were World War II veterans that began this kind of concept who rode motorcycles, and they entered popular culture as a rebellious sort due to movies like Marlon Brando's The Wild Ones. And at first, they were a group of people who drank too much and were reckless and kind of rowdy. They were, like I said, they were veterans from World War II, and they come home and this is what they like to do. Now, the American Motorcycle Association makes public statements saying that 99% of motorcycle riders are law-abiding citizens. So this is where groups of motorcycle riders who don't appreciate the AMA speaking for them basically began to call themselves the one percenters, especially in areas like Oakland, California, where the Hells Angels eventually developed. We're the 1% that isn't the law-abiding group of citizens that you're talking about. Now, the Hells Angels, there's a lot of myth and folklore with them, but their code of conduct basically, essentially, if we look at the big concepts anyways, were the following things. Members were not supposed to shoot drugs. Okay, they were not supposed to mess with other members' women. They were never supposed to lie to one another. And if one person messes with a Hells Angel, that's essentially meaning you're messing with all of them. And to keep things in order internally, they had a $5 fine if angels began fighting with one another. And that usually wasn't enough to stop that from happening. Okay. Bob Dylan once wrote, "To live outside of the law, you must be honest," which is interesting. But if you think about it, in many outlaw settings, there is actually much less flexibility in the moral code. And retribution is often swift and without compromise if that law code is broken. Now, Sonny Barger, the head of the Angels, was essentially really somebody that experimented and used acid, LSD, and he basically wanted to party and groove with the musicians. See, but the problem is when the concert is moved outside of San Francisco and now is moved to Altamont, and Barger actually warned them about this, the San Jose chapter of the Hells Angels are now, it's in their jurisdiction. And that's who's going to show up at Altamont along with some others. And so right away, you get the sense of pending doom as this concert begins to kind of happen. 50,000 people, for instance, arrived early, and right away, the scene seems to be different. So the night before the concert, there's already 50,000 people there. There's certainly plenty of marijuana and LSD, just like at Woodstock. But the scene that you see over and over again in Altamont is a lot of people seem to be drinking this half-gallon Red Mountain red wine that was for sale in the area for about $1.55. So right away you see a difference here. You see some alcohol being mixed in already with the drugs. Now, because it's December, the early arrivals begin using wood that they're finding from fences and barns, who of course are owned by people in the area, to start fires. They also burn custom-made guitar lighting cases for the lights that they're beginning to erect for the show. These cases they were custom-made cases worth $3,500 that are thrown into these big bonfires. That's a pretty expensive bonfire, to say the least. Now, the stage at Woodstock had been 15 feet high, and it would have been naturally high at Sears Point if that's where the concert had been held. But at Altamont, they decided to build a 4-foot stage, which is a total disaster. It could not keep the people far enough away from the performers, and only a single cord essentially separates the crowd from the stage. Two troopers, as they're beginning to see what's happening here, they're seeing the number of people move into the area. They actually ran into local ranchers who they basically found driving around with loaded guns ready to protect their property. Put that in the file, like we talked about last time, of things that could have happened. But the police, of course, calmed them down. Now, the angels that are going to begin showing up and kind of, infamously being part of security here, they essentially ran the LSD trade out in San Francisco. And it's important to remember that this in terms of the counterculture being emerged with undesirables, because self-indulgence comes with a price. As much as they try to reinforce a communal socialistic structure, that can still be marketed, bought, and sold. And people are still going to make money off of something that is in high demand. If drugs are in high demand, then you have got quite a black market. And what's also going to characterize Altamont is there's a change from Owsley's LSD, the meticulously prepared purple haze. Now the LSD is mixed with a poison strychnine, and it's even mixed with speed at times, which can cause paranoia, aggression, and overstimulation. And one of the consequences of that is the desire to strip naked and take your clothes off. If you watch Give Me Shelter, you're going to see scenes of that, which is indicative of the type of LSD people were taking. And what do you think happens when you add alcohol to that mix? I can tell you it's not going to be good. Also here, that's going to characterize Altamont, the Grateful Dead, of course, were famous for something called an LSD assassination, where they essentially put LSD into food and drink of producers of Hugh Hefner's Playboy After Dark show, and kind of bragged about, and still do to this day, about how they were tripping on acid as they were filming the Grateful Dead at the Playboy Mansion. And I tell you that because a cinematographer shows up early in the morning, a woman named Joan Churchill, the day the concert starts. And she's hungry and she's kind of walking around, just getting ready for the day. And in typical communal hippie fashion, people are offering her drinks and food. And so she drinks some orange juice. And shortly after, she realizes it's no ordinary orange juice. And she realizes she's going to be on an LSD trip. And it's not a very good one. She ends up crouched, hiding under the stage for hours. And then the Dead's equipment manager, also a female companion, has the same thing happen to her. So people are dosing people, unknown, unsuspected, which is also creating quite a scene. And even if they have been experienced with LSD, some of this being mixed with speed is creating quite a reaction in them that they are not accustomed to at all. One of the first things you see as the concert is beginning is you see some Hells Angels prospects actually going out and taking wine jugs from people, just taking it right from them. So this is setting a pretty dark scene, as you can see. The Rolling Stones had a song in 65, 66, somewhere in there called Play with Fire. And as you're picturing this scene that is unfolding at Altamont, think of Proverbs 6:27, which says, "Can a man carry fire next to his chest and his clothes not be burned? Or can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched?" Now, those verses are in context talking about adultery, but Like the song that the Stones sang, Play with Fire, how many times can you plan a huge event and not pay attention to the details? How many times can you trust in the goodness of people to just figure it out? You heard Michael Lang, if you could pick that up in the clip there, where he said, we had similar issues at Woodstock and that all worked out. Well, it's a very childish approach to plan badly, to have a disaster looming, and it happens to work out once. So you say, you know what, it worked out there. I think it'll work out here again too. Proverbs 11:14 says, where there is no guidance, a people fall, but in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. Now, clearly, this should have happened here at this concert. The clip I played you hear a lot of people talking about a lot of things. There are a lot of people involved with all the bands. But rather than a bunch of people figuring the right action to take, you basically have a bunch of people pulling in the same direction, not wanting to deny themselves. And rather than, it may not be about making money, as they said, the Stones don't want any money here, but they were interested in reputation, power, respect, all of those things that may not be bought with money. But let's be clear, there were people here, including the movie making rights and things like that. There was money involved here. And Michael Lang, who was involved with the Miami Pop Festival that ended kind of badly with the police and broken fences and things like that, why does he not look at that and say, we want to avoid that? Also at a speedway. It shows a total disregard for people that may be impacted. How many people are you putting at risk? How will this impact the community that you so desperately want, allegedly to understand you and your causes? Proverbs 24:27 says, prepare your work outside, get everything ready for you in the field, and after that, build your house. In other words, don't start building your house until your fields are producing the necessary funds to finish your construction project. Think about this. Jesus says this in Luke 14:28-30. Which of you intending to build a tower does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. Yet in both cases, you see, they realize, and this going back to Woodstock, they didn't have enough to complete it, but they went ahead and do it anyways, don't they? And isn't this what has been characterization, or isn't this a characterization or something that we've seen consistent with the boomers? Think of the massive debt we are currently carrying and continue to add to. Isn't this the natural outworking of the logo, or not the logo, but the phrase, if it feels good, do it? Proverbs 22:28 says, do not remove the ancient landmark that your fathers have set. Now, we literally see the crowd tearing down fences and barns and burning them for their own comfort. Houses and fences, or barns and fences that have been built for others and by others. And symbolically, we see the counterculture doing this all the time, don't we? The boundaries and the morality that have been embraced and set by previous generations is just discarded and thrown away. Remember, don't trust anyone over 30. These boundaries there for their own protection are so quickly discarded and tossed. And as the concert begins, there is definitely a different feel here. At Altamont, rather than, unlike Woodstock, you had no older generation to take care of them, no military supplies to be flown in, no loving words of encouragement over the loudspeaker, and no hog farm to bail everyone out. The organizers, instead of accepting responsibilities, end up pointing fingers at each other. It was everybody's fault and nobody's fault. As the musicians plead for the audience and those passing as security to behave themselves and just love one another, instead it became clear, to quote Don McLean here, that no angel born in hell could break that Satan's spell. Well, that's all we have time for. But remember that all truth is God's truth. And if Jesus is who he says he is, then that changes everything. We hope you enjoyed being with us today. Join us each week for In But Not Of, a podcast dedicated to applying a Christian worldview to the study of history and culture.